My name is Amina, and I am 19 years old. Life hasn't always been easy for me, but I've learned to go with the flow. Sometimes that's the only choice you have. I grew up in a small rundown apartment with my mom, just the two of us. The walls were covered in old paint that peeled like dry skin, and every time it rained, the roof leaked so badly we had to place buckets all over the floor at night. I would lie awake listening to the soft drip of water hitting the metal bucket, wondering if life would always be like this. Mum worked 2 jobs just to keep us going in the mornings. She cleaned big houses that smelled of fresh flowers and expensive candles, the kind of houses we could never afford at night. She worked as a waitress at a small diner downtown. She came home exhausted, her feet sore, her uniform smelling like grease and coffee, but no matter how tired she was, she always kissed my forehead and asked about my day. I never knew my dad. Mom told me he left before I was born. That's all she ever said about him. At first, I asked questions. What was he like? Did he ever love us? Where did he go? But every time her eyes would turn glassy, like she was staring at something far away. Her lips would press together, and she'd force a smile, telling me it didn't matter. I stopped asking when I was 10, not because I stopped wondering, but because I hated seeing that look on her face. So I learned to stop searching for answers that would never come. I learned to accept things as they were, but deep inside I always felt like something was missing, like a puzzle with one important piece gone. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't figure out how to fill that empty space. Then when I was 17, everything changed. That's when Mum met Daniel. Daniel wasn't like the other men she had dated before, the ones with smooth words and empty promises, the ones who came and went like past seasons. He was older, almost 50, with silver strands running through his dark hair. He had a calm presence, the kind that made you feel safe, even when everything else felt uncertain. He didn't talk too much, but when he did, his words carried weight, like they had been carefully chosen. Before leaving his mouth, he worked as a mechanic, spending his days fixing cars and coming home with oil-stained hands and the faint smell of gasoline clinging to his clothes. His fingers were rough, his palm callous, proof of years spent working hard, and yet those same hands could be gentle, especially when he held Mom's hand or brushed a strand of hair from her face. Mum fell for him fast. I saw it in the way she smiled when he was around, in the way she laughed more, in the way she stopped looking so tired all the time. She started humming while cooking, something I hadn't heard her do in years. It was like Daniel had brought a piece of happiness back into her life, one she thought she had lost forever. And a year later they got married. It was a small wedding, nothing fancy, just a few close friends and a quiet ceremony at the courthouse. Mom looked beautiful in a simple blue dress, and Daniel held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. I stood by her side watching, wondering what life would be like now that he was part of our family. And just like that, Daniel became my stepfather. After the wedding, life seemed good for a while. Mum was happy, and for the first time in years our little world felt stable. But happiness doesn't always last. It started with a small cough, just a tickle in her throat that wouldn't go away. At first she brushed it off, saying it was just the weather, or maybe the dust from the shop where Daniel worked. But the cough got worse. Then came the weight loss, the tiredness, the way her face grew pale, her energy fading like a candle burning too fast. Daniel insisted she see a doctor. I remember sitting in that cold hospital waiting room, my hands clenched together, my heart pounding, when the doctor came out with a heavy look on his face. I knew something was wrong. Stage 3 lung cancer. He said the words didn't make sense at first. I kept waiting for him to say something hopeful, something like, "But we caught it early," or "She be fine." But those words never came. Mum fought God. She fought so hard. 6 long months of treatments, hospital visits, and whispered prayers. Some days she seemed almost like herself again, laughing softly at something Daniel said, squeezing my hand to let me know she was still in there, still trying. Other days she was too weak to move her eyes, tired, her body fragile like a leaf, barely holding onto its branch. Then, just after my 18th birthday, she let go. It happened at night, quiet and peaceful. One moment she was breathing, the next she wasn't. It was like she'd just decided she had fought long enough. I sat beside her, holding her hand, waiting for her to open her eyes, but she never did. I cried until I couldn't breathe, until my chest ached and my body shook. I thought the world had ended right there in that tiny hospital room. But Daniel, he was steady. He didn't try to tell me it would be okay or that time would heal everything. He just sat with me, his arm around my shoulders, holding me together when I felt like falling apart. After Mum was gone. I expected everything to fall apart. I had nowhere else to go. No money, no job, no family. Part of me thought Daniel would send me away, tell me I was old enough to figure things out on my own. After all, I wasn't really his daughter. He had married my mum, not me, but he didn't. The night after the funeral, we sat in the quiet house, the air thick with grief. I stared at the floor, my mind empty, my heart heavy. That's when Daniel spoke. His voice was steady, like he had already made up his mind. I wanted to argue and remind him that I wasn't really his responsibility, but I was too tired and broken to say anything, so I just nodded. That's how I ended up living with my 50-year-old father-in-law in his small house on the outskirts of town. Some nights I lay awake listening to the silence, wondering if I truly belonged here. But Daniel never made me feel like a guest. He didn't hover or try to fix everything, and for that I was grateful. Daniel and I got along well. He was respectful and always knocked on my bedroom door before entering, even though it was his house. I liked him too, but he wasn't perfect. He smoked too much and occasionally forgot to eat if I didn't remind him, but he cared for me in a way that no one else had. I started calling him Papa because I had a secret about myself that I had never told anyone, not even my mother when she was alive. It wasn't the kind of thing you just brought up in conversation, not when everyone else seemed so normal. I'm 19 now, but even when I turned 18, something that was supposed to happen never did. My period. You know, that monthly thing that all the girls whispered about in school, rolling their eyes about cramps, moaning about mood swings, and packing pads or tampons into their bags as if it was some sort of covert mission. I listened to their complaints, nodding along like I understood, but the truth, I had never experienced it, not once. At first I thought maybe I was just a late bloomer. Some girls started early, some started late. Right, that's what they said. But as the months passed, then years, and still nothing, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something wasn't right. I wasn't clueless. I paid attention in biology class. I studied the diagrams of the female reproductive system, traced my fingers over the pages of textbooks trying to understand. I flipped through magazines that talked about becoming a woman, about hormones and changes, and all the things I was supposed to feel, but my body didn't seem to get the message. It was like I was frozen in time, stuck in some strange in-between stage while everyone else moved forward. I wanted to ask someone, a doctor maybe, or even just a friend. But how do you bring something like that up? Hey, by the way, my body forgot to hit play on puberty. Know anything about that? The thought made my stomach twist with embarrassment. What if they looked at me like I was broken? What if they pitied me? Worse, what if they laughed? So I kept quiet. I stuffed the worry deep down, pretending it didn't matter, hoping that maybe one day my body would catch up, that maybe I wasn't as different as I feared. But in the back of my mind, the question never went away. What if something was really wrong with me? And what if I was too afraid to find out? Daniel didn't know either at first, but he was observant. Ever since I moved in, he'd been the one buying me stuff, pads, tampons, things like that. He'd leave them in a little brown bag on my bed. Every month, no questions asked, I take the bag, say thank you, and stash it under my sink. Unopened months went by, and he never made use of them. I believe he noticed, because one day, when I was 18 and a half, he sat me down in the kitchen and said, I don't mean to pry, but you're not using those things. I get you. Is everything okay? I froze, got hot, and stared at the chipped table between us. What do you mean you're 18? I muttered. I don't know, Papa. It just hasn't happened. He leaned back in his chair, looking surprised but not angry. Well, I guess you've seen a doctor. No, I didn't want to tell Mom, and now my voice trailed off. I don't want to tell Mom, I said, but now she's gone, and I don't have the money or the courage to go to a clinic. Daniel nodded slowly. All right, tell me if you ever feel strange or anxious, and we'll work it out. There's no shame in it. I nodded in return, appreciating that he didn't push. Daniel never made me feel inferior, even when I thought I wasn't doing well at being normal. 3 months later, it finally happened. I was reading a battered paperback I had found in the attic when I felt a strange ache in my stomach. I ignored it at first, but when I went to the bathroom, I saw blood, not much, but enough to understand what it meant, and my heart raced. I wasn't afraid, exactly, just shocked because my body had finally decided to catch up. I didn't tell Daniel right away. Instead, I took one of the pads from under the sink, figured out how to use it, thank God for the box's instructions, and spent the day feeling different, as if I had crossed some invisible line. That evening, when Daniel came home from the garage, I waited until we were eating spaghetti with sauce from a jar before I said anything. "Papa," I began, swirling my fork in the noodles, and he looked up from his plate, perplexed by what had happened. His eyes widened, and then he smiled, a rare big smile that revealed the gap between his front teeth. "Well, about time," he said, reaching over to Pat with my hand. "You're a woman now, Amina. Just be careful, all right? Things change once this starts. You can get pregnant now, so you have to protect yourself." He laughed, holding up his hands. I know. Just saying you're young. Pretty boys will start noticing soon enough, so I'm not around to scare him off all the time." I rolled my eyes, but I knew he was right. Life continued like that for a while, getting used to my monthly cycle cramps, headaches, and everything. Daniel began placing small extras in the brown bags and continued to check in to make sure I had all I needed. Bars of chocolate. Then came the weekend that changed everything. It was a Saturday, hot and sticky, even though it was late fall. Daniel had the day off, and I had spent the morning cleaning the house while he fiddled with an old radio in the living room. Noon, he entered the kitchen where I was scrubbing dishes and leaning against the counter. It was sweet, like he was trying to be the dad I had never had, and I trusted him more than anyone else. "Amina," he said, his voice quieter than usual, "I've been thinking, you're 19 now and you're figuring out this whole woman thing. I'd like to help you, give you some tips, guide you a little." I turned off the faucet, drying my hands on a towel. "Guide me? Like, what?" He shifted, looking uncomfortable but determined. "About your body, how to take care of it, understand it, stuff your mom would have told you if she was still here." I tilted my head, curious. "Okay, but haven't you already been doing that with the bags and all?" "Yeah, but there's more to it," he said. "Things I can't explain here. How about we go somewhere just for a day, somewhere private?" I didn't know what to say. It sounded odd, but Daniel had never given me a reason to doubt him. He'd been my rock since Mom died. Where I asked, "Is there a hotel a couple towns over?" He said, "Nothing fancy, just a place we can talk, and I can show you some things. It'll be easier there." I hesitated at a hotel that felt strange, but his eyes were steady and serious, like this mattered to him all right. When he finally said, "We'll leave in the morning tomorrow," I said. The following day, we drove an hour to this small roadside hotel with a flickering neon sign that said vacancy. My stomach was all knotted up, but I told myself it was okay because Daniel wouldn't do anything strange because he was family. He checked us in and got us 2 rooms next to each other, and we dropped our bags off before meeting in his room. The room smelled like bleach and old carpet, but the bed was made, and there was a small table by the window. He pointed to the chair, and I did, and he sat on the edge of the bed facing me. "What I'm going to tell you, Amina, is personal. You shouldn't discuss it with anybody, not even your friends." "Why not?" he said. "A father teaching his daughter is something that people wouldn't understand," and I nodded despite the tightness in my chest. "Okay, I promise," he said, taking a deep breath. "Good. Now that you're a woman, that means your body is yours to know, and I'm going to guide you through how it feels and how it works. First times are always special." It's difficult to describe what happened next because he didn't just talk. He showed me things, including gentle touches on my arms, shoulders, and back. He explained that it was about accepting myself and feeling at ease in my own skin. It wasn't harsh or incorrect. Rather, it was slow and careful, as if he was teaching me something sacred. I had never been touched like that before, not by anyone, and I enjoyed the warmth of it and how it made me feel seen. However, for almost an hour, I felt strange and perplexed. When it was finished, he sat back and said, "Are you okay?" I replied in a weak voice. He smiled softly and said, "I think you enjoyed it a little, didn't you?" I nodded because, even though I didn't fully understand why, he was right when he said, "A little good is all that needs to be, but keep in mind that nothing is ours." We drove home that night, and I didn't get much sleep, and my mind kept racing. Had that been okay? Was it normal? Daniel pretended that nothing had changed. The following day, he made coffee and asked if I wanted eggs, but I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something had changed between us. Weeks went by, and he never mentioned it again, but I began to notice things like the way he would occasionally watch me as if he was waiting for something, or the way he would linger after he hugged me goodnight. I wasn't sure what to do with it, But that day in the hotel stuck with me a secret that I couldn't unravel. One night, I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when I heard him knock on my door. "Amina." "Yes," I said, sitting up. And he opened the door, a crack, "Just to check on you. You've been quiet lately." "I'm fine." I pretended that he nodded, but his eyes lingered. "You know, you can talk to me about anything." I know I said it, and I meant it, but how could I ask if what we'd done was okay? He smiled, his eyes glinting knowingly, and then closed the door with a gentle click, leaving me in my own mental silence. The air still smelled faintly of his cologne, which had once meant home, safety, and guidance. But now it stirred something deeper, something more complex. I sank onto the bed, my heart thumping rhythmically. I am now 19 years old and living under the roof of a man who has been my teacher, my protector, and my secret. My secret is so entangled in whispers and stolen glances that I hardly know where truth ends and deception begins. I tell myself that it's okay, that this is just the way life has turned out, but the weight of it weighs so heavily and relentlessly on me that I could never say it aloud. Not to my friends, not to the world, and possibly not even to myself, because once the truth gets out, there is no turning back. Would I still be the girl who once saw him as a father, or would I change into someone completely different?